Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. For any of you who don't know me, I'm Shannon, and I am honored to be the executive director of the Mesa Verde Foundation. I just want to share a little bit about how this is going to go before we actually get started. Um, we You can probably notice as you were logging in that we set this up as a meeting rather than as a webinar. And we did that because we just want everyone to feel comfortable and engaged and really feel like you're part of today's gathering. So please know that we're very excited to have you here, and we look forward to all of your engaging questions and comments. But we're gonna let our speaker go ahead and make his presentation first, and then we're gonna open it up for questions. So please just, if you can hold off, I know it's going to be hard, but if you can hold off until he gets to his Q&A portion of the event, then we can go ahead and just really utilize our time best and more importantly, uh, Mr. Barnes's time. So, my hope is that when we do get to the question and answer portion, that you're going to feel comfortable and you're just going to ask your own question. But if that's, or make a point, either way, but if that is uncomfortable for you in any way, just drop your question into the chat box and then I'll read it for you. Okay, great. Let's proceed. I'm gonna follow along on my notes. So if I'm not looking at the camera, it's because I don't want to miss anything here. As I have the honor of introducing our very special guest today, Christopher Barnes. Chris is a nationally recognized expert on wilderness policy and public land stewardship. He retired in 2015 from the Arthur Carhart National Wilderness Training Center, where he played a significant role in shaping wilderness management across the United States. He was the lead author of the Bureau of Land Management 2012 Wilderness and Wilderness Study Area Policies and has co-authored numerous reports and law articles, excuse me. Okay, I'm going to try that again. Law journal articles on wilderness management. If you're a fan of PBS, you probably recognize his name from the PBS documentary American Values, American Wilderness, which he both wrote and directed. Chris has also been a valued volunteer at Mesa Verde National Park since 2017. His work as a volunteer has helped to connect him to the incredible landscape of the park, which I think will be obvious to you as he shares today. Please join me in welcoming Chris Barnes.
Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate it. Your bio reminded me that your reading of my bio that I had worked on as the lead author of the Bureau of Land Management's Wilderness and Wilderness Study Area Policies. And today I received notice that tomorrow the Trump administration is giving 60-day notice on their rewrite of my policies.
Oh,
So
wow.
presumably in 60 days, everything I ever did that was worth anything other than this book will have disappeared.
Good thing we have the
So,
book.
yeah. So what I thought I'd do today is just briefly outline that the two tasks I was given by Cliff Spencer, the superintendent at Mesa Verde, prior to Casey, and show some slides that are associated with that, and then we'll take questions and answers. I'll have answers for you. As Shannon said, I moved here with my wife, Kathleen Stokowski, in 2017 and went to visit Cliff. He had been a student of mine at the Carhart Wilderness Training Center, and he was on the very last field trip that I led there. And so I said, I'd like to come in and see if there's something I might do that would use my expertise to help Mesa Verde. And he brought in Alan Loy, who was the wilderness coordinator at the park at the time. And the two of them decided that they thought Perhaps I could help with wilderness character monitoring, get that monitoring off the ground here at the park. The Wilderness Act says that wildernesses shall be managed in a way to preserve their wilderness character, but it doesn't say how to do that. And I had been on a team that worked for about 10 years on figuring out just how you manage changes in wilderness character, how you monitor them, how you document them, what to do about them. And so I'd be happy to do that. That was, something that I had some expertise in. And I immediately saw, though, that there were two problems with that. One of them was not a surprise, and that is the Wilderness Act defines all these characteristics of wilderness. One of them is that a wilderness, quote, has an outstanding opportunity for solitude or a primitive and unconfined type of recreation, unquote. And I knew that Mesa Verde does not allow recreational use of its wilderness. It is the only terrestrial wilderness out of almost 800 in this country that does not allow any use at all. And I was worried. I didn't know how I was going to figure out how am I going to come up with a measure of something that is required in wilderness, but is not happening in Mesa Verde. I figured, well, I'll get to that eventually. The other issue really surprised me, and that was by Park Service policy, areas that are not designated as wilderness, but the park thinks are suitable for wilderness, they are managed according to the Wilderness Act until Congress gets around to either designate it or release it. And I had no idea what areas in the park satisfied that. I didn't know what areas they saw as suitable, but hadn't been designated. And Alan informed me that's because we don't have any. And I said, You're kidding me. You don't have any. And he said, no, we've never done that inventory. So the Mesa Verde Wilderness was designated in 1976. We're coming up on the 50th anniversary on October 20th. And unlike any other wilderness that I know of, it had associated with it, the designation had two congressional records associated with it, one from the Senate, one from the House. And they said, in essence, we understand you're doing cultural inventory at the moment in the park. When that is completed, the park then needs to do a wilderness inventory for wilderness characteristics and make recommendations as to what areas should be designated as wilderness that we haven't with this law. This is just the beginning. We expect there will be more. Well, that was 1976. The cultural inventory was done in 1977. And here it was in 2017, and that inventory had never been done. So I had done wilderness inventories on a couple 100,000 acres in southeast Utah. And I said to Cliff, I'll do it. I'll do the inventory. I'll be allowed into the Mesa Verde backcountry for 3 years looking for wilderness. Please. And he said, okay, you're on. So that's how I started the project that became the book. A lot of it was just the book came out of my looking at the records in the park filing system. How did we get from 1906, when anybody could go anywhere in Mesa Verde at the time of designation, to 76, where it was closed, and what's happened since then? So that's the book. I'm not going to get into the book at the moment, but I do want to show you some of the things I found on my inventory. I'm going to go on the assumption that you all have been to at least, you've been to the park, right? Everyone's been to the park. I'm going to go on that assumption. I'm going to show you things that uh, you have not seen, and nor am I likely to ever see them again. Okay. Okay. Hello. Wake up. There we go. So this is the map of the park that you've all seen from the old brochure. In this, the roads are in black. The trails open to the public are in red. And my inventory was kind of broken into four different types of things that I was looking at, or ways that I looked at. First, there were the dirt roads that are closed to the public, but that the Park Service uses. Um, and I explored those. Then there were roads that the Park Service no longer drives, but had been used at some point in the past, but they are revegetating. And so I walked those. And then there were trails that are now closed to the public. They include the old tourist trail. Actually, this is the new old tourist trail. The old tourist trail had a different terminus on the west end. This is from like the 1930s that this started being used, and also the accelerated public works trail from the 1960s. So, in addition to the roads and trails, I also went cross country looking to see what was out there. This included a couple of places outside the park on the North Escarpment. And all in all, it was a great 3 years wandering around. So that's where I went. Let's look at some of what I saw. I have a thing about old infrastructure. I just love old infrastructure. And here was this sign: Wickiup Canyon Trail to the right, Long Mesa Trail to the left, along with Springhouse and Rock Springs. Now, the Wickiup Canyon Trail, the last time that appeared on a park map was 1949. It was very difficult to maintain. It hasn't been used at all in decades, but I just love finding this sign in the backcountry. It was cool. And then there were the usual views of sites that everyone who comes to Mesa Verde gets to see Square Tower House, just not from where I saw it, which happened to be down in Navajo Canyon. People, if they have good binoculars, can see not this view of the Navajo Watchtower, but I got this view, which is not too unlike the view that Gustav Nordenskjöld had of it in 1891. That was cool. Okay, so besides the big structures, there were little things. This is one of my favorite things that I saw in the backcountry. This piece of pottery. Um, what is up with this? I mean, I've never seen. I can't say I've never seen a piece of pottery like this, because there's another sherd, I'm assuming of the same pot, that was about 2 feet away. That's it. So what was this? Was this an accident? And if so, what was the reaction to the accident? Well, I blew this one. It's going to turn into temper for the next pot. Or was it, well, this is weird. How did I make this? That's if it was an accident. Suppose it was on purpose. Suppose this pot was made by the P3 Picasso. Then what would be the reaction to that? That is one ugly pot. You do not expect me to serve guests food out of that pot, do you? Or maybe it was, that was, that this thing is awesome. Can you teach me how you did that? I suspect that was not one of the responses because I haven't ever seen any other pot like this. And no one I've asked has ever seen a pot that was painted like this. Oh, then there's this, a piece of corrugated pottery with the maker's fingerprints in it. You know, you can see these in a museum and you can see those fingerprints and think, well, that's wow, that's wild. And maybe you can actually touch it and see my fingerprints and that potter's fingerprints from so long ago. But there was something about finding it out there where the pot, well, maybe if not where the pot was made, but where the pot was broken, perhaps. And I was there, and there's that link across the centuries. And then, I was wandering around, going down this hill, hundreds of yards from the nearest habitation, and came across this, an axe head, almost pristine condition. What was that doing out there? I can hear the man looking for his axe. Where's my axe? Have you seen my axe? And perhaps his wife is going, will you just leave the axe? We've got to take off Razuni now. Kids, have you seen my axe? There's just something about stumbling upon this in the middle of nowhere, such a fine thing. And then here's a site. People wouldn't recognize it as a site. It's in the middle right-hand side down there. There's not much to look at, but there is this to look at. This is in the book. If you've gotten that far, you might have seen it already. This is, I guess it's in the book because it's just about the most wonderful thing that I've found, to me anyway. It's a piece of petrified wood. That's it. It's just a piece of petrified wood. It has not been modified in any way. But the thing that's special about it is it's miles from the nearest source of petrified wood. Somebody 1,000 years ago picked that thing up and brought it home. And I don't know why. As I said, it hasn't been modified in any way. Was it going to? There have been a few tools found made of petrified wood. This was not one. Was it going to be something? Did the finder just thought, no, I like this. I want to bring it home. And it has no meaning outside of being at this site. You wouldn't pick that up and put it in the museum, right? It's a piece of petrified wood. What's the big deal? It only has meaning here. Well, those were the culturally related things, some of them that I saw, and that's what Mesa Verde was originally designated for and what it is known for. But there's also a natural component out there. There's Waters Canyon filled with an exotic plant, smooth brome, that was unfortunately planted in the park on purpose after the fires of 1959. And the Park Service thought, well, we need to stabilize the soil, and it won't be a few more years before the natives take over and crowd out these exotic plants. Didn't turn out that way. But then there are also these plants. This is Cliff Palace milk vetch. As far as anyone knows, it grows only on Mesa Verde. And here the plant scientist at the park is doing a monitoring study of these four plants to see how well they deal with being in the trail or being off the trail. It's kind of a cool thing to see. And there are the animals that are out there, whether they're the native red-tailed hawk or the ubiquitous non-native starling on the right. And speaking of non-natives, there's the elk, which is non-native. We can talk about that more afterwards if you want. But there are elk in the backcountry that you can see, and there are these cute little guys, collared lizards, spectacular. There's also the evidence of the animals having passed. I saw bear tracks out there and mountain lion tracks. And I tell you, there's nothing that focuses the attention quite so dramatically as coming upon fresh predator tracks or even a bear's tracks, even though they're not widely known for attacking human beings, not black bears. But it's just, you get this, the goose skins, is one of my Native American friends calls them. Okay. Those are all like individual components of what's out there, but there is the land itself, all of these components taken together. This happens to be a cottonwood gallery along the Mancos River on the very eastern boundary of the park. Back in the mid 60s, Superintendent Gillette suggested that this might be a perfect place for a long-term group camp. The problem was that there was no public access to this, and it didn't look like the Park Service was going to be able to pick up a way of getting the public to this place. So that plan was soon dropped. But in addition to being a historically interesting place, you'll notice that there are no young cottonwoods here. Cottonwoods need to have their feet wet, shall we say. They need to be flooded to get good start on life. And the Mancos River no longer floods. The water is used upstream for a variety of purposes, including providing water to the park for the visitation. One of the years I was there, the river actually ran dry. So this has a story behind it, in addition to the the management of the area. It also reflects the management outside the area. This was another great experience for me. This is the lower end of Moorfield Canyon. The park boundary is just a few yards behind where I was when I took this picture. And I mean, this is just a picture, but being there, there's something special about being there. 1,000 years ago, there would be, I'd be standing at the door of a small pueblo, and there'd be other pueblos in the distance, cornfields, cooking fires. I asked a woman, a Gwich'in woman from northern Alaska. She would talk about this relationship with the land, and I said, you know, of course, Native Americans have a different relationship with the land, don't they? And she said, anybody can have that relationship if they're open to that relationship. And here, I think, is a place of that relationship. And then there's just beauty. You know, I find this spectacularly gorgeous. looking at the East Escarpment and then Weber Mountain and then the La Platas in the distance. Um, Beauty is its own reward and is there actually whether or not anybody gets to see it. So that's how I spent my summer vacation or summer vacations and fall and spring and some winter vacations. So, uh, are there questions?
So I did have everybody muted while you were speaking because we were getting a little background noise. So if you'd like to ask a question, you actually have to unmute yourself. So please go ahead and do that really quickly. Um, I
Well, I have one.
Perfect.
Chris, so can you just talk a little bit about then how did you address this issue around recreation versus wilderness? I mean, how did you go about, thinking about that and how did it evolve in terms of your proposal?
Well, I did it a little differently than I would for the BLM because I knew that there were some specific concerns that the Park Service did not want to have to manage their cliff dwellings or most of the cliff dwellings according to the Wilderness Act because that would make management more difficult. In wilderness, we generally there are things that are generally prohibited. They can be accepted, but generally there's no landing of aircraft, or there's no use of motor vehicles or motorized equipment. And so you can see my proposal. I think it's in the color um, the color handout that you all got because it doesn't show up well in the book. I think it's number 42. Um, the part of it was easy. I mean, the original boundaries made no sense, and my impression was that it was the park thumbing their nose at the Department of Interior by giving bogus boundaries, and so I made the boundaries of the existing units instead of being along surveyed land lines that they would come to the nearest um, human-made feature set back from that, but obviously easily found on the land. Um, so it was easy enough to say, oh man, almost the entire eastern two-thirds of the park has wilderness character. But I think, Mark, there's a difference between saying there's wilderness character there and saying it should be designated as wilderness. And I outline in the conclusion, you'll get that there are the three ways the park can go forward. They can just do things as they always have, um, which seems to be a fairly good bet because that's what's happening. There is the um, let's get it undesignated as wilderness, which sometimes I think that'd be a great idea, but it's never been done. An entire wilderness has never been undesignated. Um, Maybe this is the opportunity to do that. I'm not sure. The third is let's see if we can find some way of providing some kind of access. Now, with the way and I guess I lean toward that, being a wilderness person. Um, you know, we as I write in the book, I'm quoting someone saying, "We see the world not as it is, but as we are." And I'm a wilderness person, so I'm going to think, oh, let's get there's an experience in the Mesa Verde wilderness that you cannot have elsewhere in Mesa Verde. So let's find some way to open it somehow. The difficulty, of course, now is that they are so reduced in staff that there's no good way of getting from here to there, at least in the near future, I see. Did I answer that question?
Yeah.
Did I answer your
Yeah.
question, Mark?
And
Okay.
you were you alone in doing this, or did you have a team? I'm afraid I haven't
Oh,
spent much time with the book. I should probably
oh,
it's probably in
that's
there.
okay. I did it. I did it alone, except my wife was with me about I would say maybe three-quarters of the time. One
Nice.
quarter of the time, I was absolutely alone. Um, there was no one else, and of course, I'm a volunteer, as I was told, and the fact that I know more about wilderness stewardship and designation and inventory process than anybody in the park is meaningless at the end of the day because the park has to go, yes, this is what we'd like to do, or we'd like to change this a little bit. Um, but yeah, I got to have talk about your outstanding opportunity for solitude. Man, it was,
Yeah. Well, you're a great photographer too, by the way.
oh, thanks. Well, I didn't show you. I mean, there were 1,000 pictures.
Yeah.
I didn't show you the bad ones.
This is Ed. I have a question. Are
Yeah.
the pressures you're seeing on designating wilderness areas um, shared with other parks? You mentioned that Mesa Verde stands alone in many ways. How does that compare to what's going on across the country?
Well, there the Park Service, well, it's interesting. Let's see. The Forest Service is almost done with wilderness designation, and they have been for roughly 20 years. I'm generalizing. The Fish and Wildlife Service, same thing. The Park Service is not, or let's say before January of 2025, okay, because things changed then. The Park Service was not pushing because wilderness stewardship in the parks, as I go into in the book, the Park Service didn't think wilderness was necessary for them. It didn't apply to the parks. We're already protecting all these things. It's the BLM and the Forest Service that need to have lands protected. Um, and so very little has been done in the way of Park Service additional wilderness recently. But you think of some places that would be a no-brainer, like Yellowstone or Glacier. They don't have wilderness. There's no designated wilderness there. If there were, would it change the stewardship any? Probably very little. Most of the recent designations of wilderness have been in the BLM. And partly that is because the BLM didn't get into the wilderness game, as it were, until 1976 with the passage of FLPMA, the Federal Land Policy and Management Act. In 1964, BLM isn't mentioned. The very first wilderness bill in 1956 mentioned Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, and lands managed by the Bureau of Indian Affairs for various tribes. That was dropped because it was easily and earlyly, it was seen early to be a patronizing aspect of land stewardship. And so that was dropped. But as I say, the BLM came 12 years later to the wilderness game. And so a lot of the work is much more recent in the BLM. Did that answer your question, Ed?
Yeah, I did. There's so many varied agencies and restrictive areas with different designations that it's unique. It seems that Mesa Verde is one of a kind in terms of the designation within the park itself.
Well, a lot of parks have wildernesses designated within them. It's a part of the park. Rocky Mountain, for instance, has designated wilderness within Rocky Mountain National Park. The thing that makes Mesa Verde unique as I said, is that people are not allowed in the Mesa Verde Wilderness. That is the only one. I think the Park Service has about 40% of the acreage of the National Wilderness Preservation System. There are in the neighborhood of 111, 112 million acres. 40% of that is Park Service. A lot of that is in Alaska, like Wrangell St. Elias is the biggest wilderness, is in like 13 million acres of wilderness in one park unit. But Death Valley has wilderness. Lassen Volcanic has wilderness. Sequoia Kings Canyon has wilderness. As I said, Rocky Mountain has wilderness. So there are a lot of Park Service areas that have, not if not all, but a great percentage of their backcountry designated as the wilderness. What makes Mesa Verde different is that they never did a suitability study until I came along, and they've never allowed people into their wilderness.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Chris, could you just real quickly, I'm curious, how did the book come about and how long a process was that putting that all together, writing that up?
Okay. Well, it took me 7 years to write the book, but I didn't know I was writing a book for the first couple of years of that. It really came out of my trying to understand how could the park make a decision that we're not going to allow people in the wilderness when people had been allowed in those areas under park supervision for decades. How did they get to that? And so I started digging through all the files. The book starts with a quotation from another book that I read that had to do with Arctic exploration. That's something about real history is made by the documents that were not meant to be published. And that's what I was looking at, one thing after another from the park's internal files. I go, really? You actually told people, this is in the 80s, you actually told people that the backcountry had always been closed? That's a lie. Why did you say that? Why did Jesse Nussbaum, who is, if you think of a superintendent of Mesa Verde, you think of Jesse Nussbaum, and he recognized in 1938 that there was wilderness in Mesa Verde that was worth protecting. How did we get from Jesse Nussbaum in 1938 to less than 30 years later, an administration going, oh, no, there's nothing in here that's worthy of being wilderness. And it's funny, in all the documents that I looked at, and I'll come back to that in a second, but I never found the smoking gun document. I never found the document that said, we are closing Mesa Verde's wilderness to the public, or the backcountry, because it happened before wilderness was designated. When you read the book, there are about 1,200 citations. Don't be scared, or don't. How do I want to say this? A lot of it's just, it's required of an academic, and this is academic book, but also scattered back in there are some little gems, some nuggets of enrichment, if you will, things that I found really interesting or illustrative that don't really have to do with Mesa Verde per se, but have to do with the Park Service in general or wilderness in general. And so what I do whenever I read a book that's end noted, like this one is, I do a chapter at a time of, I'll look at the notes and I'll see which notes are just citations and which notes have an explanation of For instance, what did the Supreme Court have to say about whether the states or the federal government owns wildlife? I think that's interesting. And so, there's a reference to that in the end notes. It goes into the Supreme Court wording of Hunt v. U.S. in 1928. So there's things like that in there, and I would encourage anyone who reading the book, don't just read the book, but at least skim through the end notes, and you can forget about all the citations for, I mean, you don't need to know the citation out of the staff meeting notes from January 3rd of 1961, but you might want to know what Jesse Nussbaum had to say about, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what you'd want to know, but there's interesting stuff back there. Is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, it was about 5 years that I knew I was writing a book. I first shopped it to University of Colorado. They turned it down. They wanted more on how the park was managed prior to 1906. And I wasn't interested in writing that. There were books that addressed that. This book was not about how white people screwed over the Native Americans. That had been dealt with. I did deal with how the park was screwing over the Utes during the course of the stewardship of the park, but it just wasn't something that I wanted to write, and they didn't want to publish the book without it. So, you know, University of New Mexico said yes. I was really lucky. Who else did I? There's only one other publisher that I went to, and that was, for heaven's sakes, help me, Mark.
I don't know.
You know who you
Did you go to Torrey House or
Torrey House. Thank you. See, you
Okay.
knew. You
Yeah.
knew. Torrey House. And they went, no, this isn't our kind of book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. I lucked out. The third publisher, there's a charm. That's, for somebody who had never written a book,
Outstanding.
yeah, lucky.
This is Ed again, another comment rather than question, but I recently have been doing some work with W.H. Jackson, the photographer in the 1870s in the Hayden surveys. And he was there in 1873, I believe, and he had comments very similar to yours about some of the unique items that were found there and pictures that he took at that time, long before Weatherall's and company. But he had very similar comments about what unique things he found, certain sherds and certain buildings or structures and features, very similar to what you were commenting on.
Yeah, he of course was lucky to get here before people started stealing stuff, and was down on the part of the mesa that is in the Ute Mountain Tribal Wilderness Park.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful pictures down there. Yeah. Oh, to be back. Jesse, before he was the superintendent at Mesa Verde, went out taking pictures in what is now Canyons, the Ancients National Monument, from now almost 120 years ago. And it's remarkable what was there just then in 1908 that has gone since then.
Scary.
Yeah. And that's one of the things my wife and I have this discussion all the time. She says, you can't let people into the Mesa Verde wilderness. Everything that's out there will disappear. And I say, well,
'Cause,
I say, well, 'cause, you know, that's one of the things my wife and I have this discussion all the time. She says, you can't let people into the Mesa Verde wilderness. Everything that's out there will disappear. And I say, well, 'cause, you know, that's one of the things my wife and I have this discussion all the time. She says, you can't let people into the Mesa Verde wilderness. Everything that's out there will disappear. Yeah. A lot of
I
it
can,
already has disappeared from the public. A lot of it's disappeared because it's been collected by the Park Service and sits in boxes where no one can see it, but at least scientists have a relationship or could have a relationship with it. Um, but Alan Loy used to say, who are we managing the park for? Are we managing the park for present and future generations of visitors, or the 5% of present and future thieves? And I'd have to say that the relationship between the visitor and the resource is much more respectful than it was even just a short 50 years ago. I think most people approach the resource with more respect. And one of the things I did in my proposal for opening up the wilderness is requiring everybody to be receive uh, mandatory interpretation from a ranger. This is a thing of mine, and structured a whole spiel, shall we say, based around. I'm not going to get too much into the weeds, but Kohlberg's 6 stages of moral development, so that you can approach people from A, it's illegal, all the way through it's respectful to leave things there, realizing that stuff is going to be taken. Not going to open up everything to everybody. Um, it's certainly a question that would have to be addressed. How are we going to steward this area if we're opening it up to the public?
good stuff.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
difficult questions,
It is. It absolutely is.
especially to be decided by a group in Washington rather than yourself, who is there with feet on the ground.
Yeah.
That never
Yeah.
happens anywhere else either.
That is, yeah, that's an ongoing issue. I I can't say I look forward to it, but I'm interested in seeing what happened to the wilderness policies that I wrote um, as of tomorrow.
Let us know.
Okay.
Our timing of this was pretty interesting considering that you just found that out today.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I got heads up from one of my contacts in the wilderness NGO saying, in case you hadn't heard, and I hadn't heard. And I would have been told that the guy who replaced me as the wilderness lead for the BLM, or the wilderness training lead, um, didn't tell me this was happening. So I imagine he was not consulted in the rewrite of the policy.
Any other questions?
Anything else about the park?
Chris, I'd just like to get your email or phone number so I can buy you a cup of coffee sometime in Memphis if you're up for that.
Okay. Sounds good.
I can share that with
Okay,
him.
you can share that with everybody, either or both.
Okay.
Great.
Realizing that my wife and I share a flip phone. So if you phone me, it may take a while for me to get back to you. I am, as I was telling Shannon earlier, I am a confirmed Luddite, um, which may be why my second career was inevitable. That I would be a wilderness person, not, um, yeah. So,
I think I'd rather hear this from you than AI.
well, yeah. I, I'd rather be talking than have AI try to present this.
Well, I think if that's it, I'll go ahead and wrap us up here. Before we go, I just want to say thanks again for joining us. And of course, I want to give a great big thank you to Chris for not only his volunteer service to the park and all of the work that he did to make the book possible, but I want to say thanks to Chris because he donated all of the books for our special May giving drive. And of course, he gave up selflessly of his time preparing for today's presentation and then by joining us and sharing today. With his and your support, we raised $2,500 through this special effort. So yay! Thanks for helping us as we work toward our goal of raising more money to support Mesa Verde. Especially this year, this 120th year of the park. If you want to hear more from Chris, you should be on the lookout for more information about our symposium in Denver on Friday, September 25th, where Chris will be among our featured speakers. So please look for more information as we get closer to that. And just one more time, thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Chris.
you.
Thank you, everyone. We've really,
Thank you.
really, this was a very special opportunity, and I'm very grateful that we were able to offer it. So thank you all.
Thank you. And Shannon, if you would forward my email to everyone,
I would be happy to do that.
I would be happy to answer any other questions that happen to come up that you afterwards, or you getting further into the book and you, what did you mean by that? Or this wasn't clear, or did that really happen? Um, to which I will say, yes, it really
Yes,
did happen.
if it's in the
Uh,
book.
that's right. Oh, there's one thing there is a mistake in the book. And I might as well tell you now, even though probably no one on this Zoom call knows, but in the 1970s, I refer to the regional director, Lynn Thompson, as she. Lynn was a man. And of course, I should have realized that there was not, in the 1970s, a woman was not going to be regional director, but I didn't. So I got it wrong. Casey, when she saw this, she went, excuse me, you might want to get this changed. It was 5 months before publication, and it had already gone to the printers. So, as University of New Mexico Press says, when there's a second edition, or rather, if there's a second edition, we'll correct it. So that's my mea culpa.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I will
Okay.
share your information after this Zoom call. And then hopefully we'll have another opportunity to do something like this in the future. And I'm looking forward to seeing you present in September. So thanks again, everyone. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
rest of your evening.
Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.